Okay then, so the live stream is on. Okay, I have pleasure in opening the council briefing of the 4th of March 2025 at 6 p.m. and welcome all those in attendance. I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people of the Noongar Nation. I pay our respects to elders past and present, acknowledging that as the City of Vincent, we have a role to play in working towards reconciliation and justice for First Nations people. I have received 2 apologies tonight. I've received an apology from Councillor Warner and an apology from Councillor Wallace. And I note that Councillor Jonathan Hallett is on approved leave of absence. And apart from that, I note that all other councillors are present. Okay, can I just ask for the members of the public present, is there anyone here who wishes to speak? If you can just indicate. Yeah, okay, excellent. Okay, I noticed that at least one of you has spoken at the council meetings before, but for other people, when you come forward, could you please, sorry, I'm getting an echo. Could you please come forward? Could you please state which item you want to speak to, and please give your name and the suburb in which you reside. And we do time it to 3 minutes, in which you'll be able to see on the screen. So if anyone would like to come forward, please, as I say, first thing you do is you say which item, because we'll put that first on the agenda, and your name and where you reside, please. You don't need to give your whole address.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Zalman. Trent Will from Taylor Burrell Barnett, speaking on item 5.2, suburb of Perth. Speaking on item 5.2, but specifically in relation to the dedication of the lot 67.
Sorry. Can we just find out? We figured out the problem. Please keep speaking. Thank you. It wasn't you.
Thank you. All good. Yeah, speaking specifically in relation to lot 67, which is the right-of-way between Loftus Street and Fleet Street, which is third on the agenda. My client, Michael Spartalis, with me tonight, owns the property at 129 Loftus Street. This abuts the northern boundary of the right-of-way in question. This site is currently vacant and it is subject to a development proposal for 16 apartments. As noted in the officer's report, the dedication is requested by a proponent and we are that proponent. So I just wanted to speak to you briefly tonight. We are fully in support of the officer's recommendation. Just in relation to the matter, we have a somewhat bizarre scenario in that half the right-of-way is already owned by the city. 129 Loftus Street is the only site that abuts the right-of-way that does not have a legal right of access. And we are requesting it to assist in our development proposal. Specifically at present, the design has had to include a crossover to Loftus Street. That's our only legal point of access at the moment. And we've had to put a driveway down the side of the property with a car park at the rear. So by dedicating the right-of-way, the development is designed in a way that it can connect directly to the right-of-way in the future, and we would be able to remove that driveway, have a safer means of access, also frees up more space for landscaping and those types of things. So we are hoping that this can occur before the development actually proceeds to the construction stage, and we are respectfully seeking your support in accordance with the officer's recommendations. And we're also available to speak to any councillors throughout the week if there's any questions or queries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to address the meeting? Hello.
Dudley Meyer of Highgate. It's about items 5.1 and 7.5. It's basically the funding policies and heritage. So I object to both recommendations and I'm disappointed in the admin's response to my submissions. One of the reasons policies are developed is to give guidance to decision makers and the community when legislation and the like is silent. It benefits everybody by making it clear how people will be treated, what's expected, what's acceptable, and it ensures consistency so that everyone gets treated equally. Community elects council to approve and review policy. The staff's job is just to implement it. However, the funding policy is just a series of vague grant overviews. It's totally up to the staff to interpret these, they're so vague, without any oversight from council or the ability for the community to comment. I think you're abrogating your responsibility and delegating everything to the staff. So I'll just take the first overview, which says, funding for programs, projects and services that demonstrate outcomes that will build a strong and resilient community, as well as initiatives that ensure ongoing sustainability of community organisations. The only two important words there were the community organisations. That's all that differentiates it from the other areas. If I was to ask anybody what sort of activities this would fund, a lot of people would have trouble coming up with ideas unless they were familiar with the old policy, or they'd come up with a million possibilities. It's that vague. As it stands, there's no certainty for the community or even the council. It's left purely to the interpretation of a staff member who might not even be here next year. I totally agree with the staff that the policy doesn't need procedural elements, but it should at least state criteria, what will be funded, what won't be funded, various responsibilities, etc. And I'd suggest councillors look at the proposed policy and contrast it with the street tree policy you recently adopted. You think they're consistent in content, level of detail, style? They're not. They're miles apart. I think that reflects the siloed nature of the organisation. Also, the policy is so vague that there's no need for council ever to change it. And that means there's no opportunity for the community to actually comment on that policy. That's why I think the heritage assistance policy should be retained, albeit in a modified form. As it stands, there's a level of middle class welfare baked in, which is probably just reflects that the heritage list is a mess. It's a mixture of true heritage, which is category 1 and 2, along with an incomplete sample of character places, which results in some people with similar properties being treated differently. So I'd ask you, don't revoke the heritage grants policy, fix it up, take it out of planning. It isn't a planning policy, and that's probably why it's being revoked. Have the courage to fix the heritage list and recognise that heritage and character are not the same thing, and put more details in the grants policy for all funding categories. We elect you to make policy, not just tick the box and accept what's being dished up. If you accept what's been suggested, I think, as I said, you're abrogating your responsibilities. Thank you. And congratulations to Jay on his promotion.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so I'm assuming that there is no one else that wishes to address the meeting or has any matters. Okay. So what's going to happen now is the items that you have spoken on are going to be brought forward. There's going to be a summary of your remarks included in the minutes and any responses if they're required. And just a reminder that tonight is a briefing session, so we won't be making any decisions tonight. The decisions will be for next week. Okay. So there being no further questions, I close public question time at 6:07. Okay, so Governance Coordinator, can you confirm whether any statements have been received?
Yes, I can confirm no statements have been received.
Thank you. And CEO, could you please read out any declarations of interest?
We did discuss a couple of potential conflicts of interest, but I haven't received any in writing.
I'm going to do an explanation, if that's okay. Just to let members know, we are getting some further advice at the moment around conflicts of interest. But I expressed a concern that the matter that's coming up in relation to the discussion about my attendance and Algom might constitute a conflict of interest. But we've had conflicting advice on that, and it may also be the case that if I remove myself from that decision, I might be in breach of the Local Government Act. Because I'm not allowed to. So we're getting further advice, and by this time next week, when a decision will be required, we will have clearer advice. But for purposes of tonight, it's not a problem. So that was the main thing. And the other thing was next week we'll discuss around the issue of the discussion around the heritage policy changes as well. I thought that you were owed an explanation around that, because it seems like a clear conflict of interest to me, but however, that is not necessarily the case. So yes, and I don't want to get in trouble either way. So I'm now going to, we've got 5.2, 5.1 and 7.5. In addition to that, I'm going to see if there's any other items that councillors wish to raise. Councillor Lafontaine. Councillor Castle, Councillor Greer, Councillor Alexander, Councillor Wolf,
I had 8.3 and 8.5.
8.3 and 8.5. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's just go. Okay, so now we'll just go straight to 5.2, road dedication of various rights of way. So are there any, we note that there weren't actually questions from the public, from the gallery today, but some comments in favour of one of the proposals in particular. But does any councillor have any questions? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one. I think we've had this issue come up before, but I just wanted to check, were there any challenges involved in the right-of-ways being owned by deceased estates?
Through the chair, in this instance, no, because we're proposing to seek dedication under section 56, which is where we can demonstrate that they've been used as a road for 10 years or more, which we've been able to use, and we've confirmed that with the Department of Lands that that's the correct approach that we can take. So we don't need to go through the process of finding executors and descendants and things like that. So it's a much more streamlined process.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, we're moving on. We'll be making a decision about this next week. Okay, so 5.1, outcome of advertising revocation of policy number 7.6.1, Heritage Assistance Fund. Does anyone have any questions in relation to this matter? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess just picking up on the questions from the public gallery, we heard some views that the funding policy was perhaps quite broad and open to interpretation, and perhaps that might create some inappropriate delegations from council to staff. Noting that there have been some comments around this in the report, were there any additional comments tonight? Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Simon. Just to reiterate, the city's policy development review policy has quite a clear hierarchy of policies and I guess what the objective of those is versus documents. So we would maintain the comments that are in the report around the policy, the community funding policy, really providing the eligibility, and then the supporting information really fall within that action plan as a procedure to enact the policy. So.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? I've got a question. I mean, I understand there is actually a genuine concern about the lack of clarity around the heritage and what exactly we're talking about it would be eligible for. I know this is actually quite a controversial policy in many respects anyway, because it has been raised with me that a lot of the people who own heritage buildings also have a lot of money, and so it is a concern if there's more money being given to people who can probably afford it. In terms of the criteria and the transparency around how it's going to get used and the like, can I just get a little bit of information, a little bit of comfort in terms of the transparency around eligibility and how that's going to work? Because I suppose if something's put up that's really not fit for purpose or that councillors are unhappy with, we can always revisit this and bring the policy back.
To you, Mayor Simon. So in support of the eligibility criteria that would be listed in the community funding policy, administration is preparing guidelines which will step out how that would work and how proposals would be assessed within a competitive grant environment, which is very similar to how a number of our existing grants are currently assessed and processed. So that information will be on the website, available to support property owners when they're interested or seeking to apply for funding. So that would provide the guidance to them. At the moment, in the community funding policy, there's no change to what is eligible, which is any heritage listed place, and that really aligns with the SCP objective around conserving and enhancing our heritage places.
Are there any further questions for administration over this matter? Okay, I'll move on then. Okay, the next item is 7.5, outcome of advertising and adoption of amendments to community funding policy. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. By renaming to the Connected and Healthy Community Support Grants, are we in any way inadvertently limiting the types of activities that could be funded by the community support grants?
Yeah, Mayor Simon. No, there's nothing going to change to the eligibility or the criteria. It's just a different name for the funding stream to align better with the strategic community plan.
Are there any further questions in relation to this? So as my question is similar to the last one, it's about knowing the criteria and having the transparency over that criteria that underpins the policy, noting that if the council is ultimately dissatisfied with that, we can bring the policy back and ask to have that included in the policy. Can I ask about the level of detail that's going to be publicly available so that people will know exactly what that criteria is for eligibility?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Simon. The criteria are currently listed on the website in various different formats, so we're just making them more consistent, separating out the guidelines, the criteria and the application forms for each individual grant funding stream, so that they're easier to understand for the community. And then as each is separate documents, then they can all be reviewed on an annual basis along with any council requirements for change.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question about that. Well, part of that includes some sort of streamlined advice for community about what funding streams there are, where and how they can apply for various different sources of funding through this process.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Simon, we've decided we've amalgamated all the funding streams on one page on the website, so it's really easy to just get a quick view of every different funding stream available. And then along with each of those streams, then, as I said, there's criteria, guidelines, application forms, so it's all in one place, whereas previously there have been different pages on the website for different types of funding. So the event funding has been very separate to community funding, to travel assistance funding, so that's all been brought into one page, hopefully to make that clearer and more consistent.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering if we don't already have it here, apologies, if we can see a list of the various guidelines and documents that sit underneath this policy that will all be collected together, not necessarily the detail of all of them, but what types of guidelines or documents exist to support that.
Yeah, I can provide that in the briefing notes underneath each criteria, each funding stream. Yeah.
That would be great. And the last question is, the report refers to council oversight through the annual budget process, and I'm just wondering what level of detail is proposed to be provided to council about how the criteria has been applied and what applications have been received and the outcome of those, so there is at least a high level oversight of how the policy is working.
Through you, Mayor Simon, I have to provide that in the briefing notes. I can only answer to the event funding, which obviously we go through in detail in May every year and through the council workshop. But for some of the other grant funding, I'll have to just confirm and clarify how that's going to be reported to council.
Can I also ask, what is the time frame for when all this additional work that's going to sit underneath this policy, it's proposed to have that finalised and publicly available?
Most of the information is currently being reviewed and updated and is on the website at the moment. Some of them are pending council's decision on the policy. As soon as that's been decided next week, then we will update those relevant funding streams.
So can I ask, is it likely to be done if this is approved, that it's likely to be done in maybe a month, within a month, and all the detail will be there?
Yeah, we can say it'll be done by the end of April.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to get some indication of the sort of timeframes. Are there any other questions in relation to this item? Okay, so now I'll move on to the next item, and that's 8.3. And Councillor Wolf, you had some questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one about the draft motion on the speed zones. Firstly, congratulations on getting that motion passed through the Walga Central Metropolitan Zone. That's great, really exciting. My question was in relation to if the motion is then passed by State Council and the National General Assembly, what the sort of tangible next steps might look like. For example, if there's an existing consultation mechanism that exists between ALGA and the federal government, which I'm assuming there is, if that's caught up as part of that process. So if the motion is ultimately passed at the national level, what does the next step look like? Is that then just caught up in existing consultation processes between ALGA and the federal government post-election?
Don't quite know I don't know exactly what happens after this. If it was passed, which is still a big if, because as background, the City of Vincent's a member of a central zone of Walga, and the central zone did approve a very similarly worded motion to go to the WA State Council. Any council submitting a motion to ALGA needs to tick a box to see whether or not it's got support from the state association. So we don't know the outcome of the state council meeting, whether or not they'll endorse the City of Vincent motion. But irrespective of the outcome of putting the draft motion to ALGA, we are also thinking about writing directly to the federal and all the state government road safety ministers to ask them to think about reducing speed limits on a coordinated way in built up areas. And we could also look at writing directly to the Ausroads board, which is made up of all the CEOs or directors general of each of the state transport departments, and they set the policies and the standards for vehicle speeds across the country. So we're trying to press different buttons and different areas where no one body just is responsible for changing a speed limit across the country. So we're trying to do it in a coordinated fashion through all the different decision-making bodies and policy advisory bodies that influence the policy settings for speed zones.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, so then I'll move on to the next one, which is the information bulletin. Councillor Wolf, you had some questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the information on page 5 about the preliminary hearing that's been set for the Angrove Street petrol station refurb application. There's just been a little bit of confusion among community members that I was hoping to clarify. Firstly, just to confirm the dates that it's been set down for, the 17th and 18th of July. And secondly, whether community members might be able to attend. Thank you.
Mayor Zaman, those dates are correct, 17th and 18th of July. In terms of attendance, it will be a public hearing. As part of our briefing notes, we can include a little bit more details about that. We have updated on Imagine Vincent, there's a dedicated page for this item, and we'll include an update in there, but we can also include something in the briefing notes.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, councillors, we've got a confidential item which is on the agenda, which we just had outside of this session, a comprehensive briefing session on. Do people have any questions in relation to this confidential item? Because we will go behind closed doors if we do, but if not, we will move on. Okay. All right. Well, in that case, I thank the public and the live stream viewers, and I close the meeting at 6:24. You can turn off the live stream.